Yeah, Jamal, please.
Thank you.
Let's talk about Bonify. Let's say briefly what you are doing, what is the product, and what market you are serving to.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I feel privileged and humbled to be here in Georgia again. What we are doing is in the German market, more or less optimizing financial lives for our customers. How we do that is giving to all the currently the German customers access to their credit scoring for free. 70% out of them are connecting their checking accounts. That is a topic you mentioned earlier, open banking. And once we have the credit scoring from a credit bureau and the transactional data from the checking accounts, we could have more or less a comprehensive view on the real financial situations. And then we send to the people kind of advice, as we know earlier, 6 to 8 weeks earlier that people are going to use the overdraft. And overdraft is usually expensive, and we let them know, hey, look into your bank account, maybe you could save some money. Either you start saving or you take a consumer loan, which is much cheaper than overdraft. And we have currently approximately 700,000 users in the German market.
700,000 users, yeah. And what's your strategy? Why did you decide to start from German market? What is so specific for this country?
So there are obvious reasons, because we know the German markets. I was for 6 years a CEO of a credit bureau in Germany, and we know the whole regulation, we know all the data you can collect, how to deal with the German kind of data privacy craziness, or not craziness. So that applies to many other countries. And the other one, the size of the market. So it's a huge market. If we look in the case, what is addressable for us, and she mentioned that earlier, is just the commissions we could get, just if we can broker all the loans, and that is the money we get, is between 8 to 10 billion a year, just the German market. And imagine we expand to other European countries. So it's a huge size. It's untapped, as the entire industry is still very manual and cumbersome processes. If we could make not 100% out of it, but if we could, 50% is digital, it will be, it makes a lot of sense for the users and for our partners, like the banks or the lenders, to use the processes we are implementing. That reduces transactional cost, and that's beneficial for all parties.
So your product is quite interesting. It's something new for generally for people, right, who are using the financial application. So this is more interactive, giving advices about personal finances, right? And some people say managing personal finances and money, it's not very fun thing, right? It's sometimes boring, maybe painful to understand how you spend money, what is your financial situation. What's your points and insights on that? How did people actually adopt and use this service, and how did you like it?
Yeah, that's very interesting questions, and it goes back when we started the company earlier. We tested different messages, so what resonates to people. And we did at the beginning, as we thought, optimizing financial lives, it could be very attractive to people. And my co-founder, Andreas, who did the marketing at that time, so did different messages. So the company didn't exist at that time, and we haven't had any product. But he said, look, let's do a marketing campaign with a product which didn't exist at that time, and say, do you want to optimize your financial life? Click here and sign up with us. And we did, at the same time, different campaigns. The other one was, do you know what others know about you? So do you know what the credit bureau knows about you? And interestingly, even the product didn't exist and the company didn't exist. A huge amount of people were signing up with us. Do you know what others know? So the message, even the main purpose, is to optimize financial lives. You get attention and awareness if you tell the message in a different way. And in our case was, do you know what others know? Do you know that 40% of the data the credit bureau is usually collecting is either updated or wrong? That's attracted the people at the beginning. And then once they sign up, we start advising, sending, look, your bank balance is different, or you will get to some trouble with your bank account or with finances. And then they start brokering or taking products which we do offer. But the main message is not we optimize your financial lives, but do you know how your situation is? Do you know what others know about you? Curiosity is more interesting, at least in the German market. Curiosity was more interesting than telling the people we will advise your financial life.
Yeah, this is what we also learned with our very small project, which was, I think, 1 year ago, when Georgian banks are also moving on this direction. So the banks understood what you can do with the data that you have, so you can be more insightful to the customer. So we had this test. We released the feature in mobile banking, telling people what are the top categories that you spend money in, and what are the top merchants where you spend. And the feedback was very impressive, and people were asking, "Oh my God, where did I spend this money?" And this is huge amount of money that I spend in, let's say, bars or in taxi and in food. And we really felt that people want more. So they want to hear more about how to manage their money. And from your perspective, this is quite competitive market, right? There are so many companies trying to understand these transaction histories, data that the banks have. They try to be very innovative in features in terms of personal finance management. What's your thoughts about the future of this direction? Do you think that what banks and fintechs are serving now and suggesting to customers, this is the best that they can do, understanding what amount of data that we have in banks, or we can do better?
Yeah, two perspectives on it. The one is, and I think we are on, as a startup, we are on the edge of what currently is doing. And from our perspective, it's just the beginning. So, and it's just the very early beginning of using all the transactional data to really get real insights and to turn it to a benefit to the users. Even banks have a lot of transactional data. Either they cannot use it or they are not allowed to use it. And even if they use it, they don't have the access to the customers to tell them. From our perspective, or our current perspective, is that we have to do a lot of customer research. So when we do new features, we don't know. So many things we don't even know that is going to work or not work. Even the customers don't know. And what we changed over the time. We go out with specific messages and we do assumptions beforehand. We say, that's going to work like this. And you cannot imagine how many times we are wrong. So even our assumption, and after a research, we turned to be wrong. Why? Because no one knew, and you cannot know in upfront what is going to work and not work. And therefore, we changed the entire strategy of releasing new features. We start in asking. We start in doing a kind of mock-ups. We say, the next upcoming feature is this and that. Are you going to sign up? And then we see a kind of traction. If you ask us now, what is the rationale behind it? We don't know. We still, even we have a lot of very successful features. We don't really know why some features are resonating with the customers and others don't. And that's lead me to the conclusion that we are at the very beginning of using that kind of insights, which customers didn't know until now. So it's a new field we are entering, and it's exciting because the companies who are going to offer the most interesting features, that are going to understand the customers out there, they are going to have a competitive advantage, and then they will expand the user base.
Okay, thank you. I want to also ask you about your personal experience in building the company. You mentioned you were working for McKinsey, right? Biggest consulting company, which is operating globally, and you mentioned credit bureau that you were heading. What was this point, and what was something that made you think about starting your company? And when did you decide to actually start it?
So it's a personal, one of them is a personal reason. And if you look to my bio, you will see a kind of disrupting myself every few years. And that's what makes my life interesting. So that is the personal everyone has a kind of personal issues or not issues, and mine is disrupting myself after a few years to look what I have learned is right and to feel the pain, which is painful. To start Bonify as it is was more or less a conscious decision. So after leaving McKinsey, I went to that credit bureau, was leading it, and we looked into the strategy, what we are doing with the credit bureau. And we came across different ideas, what we could do. The one is doing the credit bureau and specifically for the digital world, e-commerce. And the other one was, okay, let's start something which at that time was early stage Credit Karma in the US, modifying that to the German market and doing it. And that was back then 2012 or something like that. And no one came to the German market and did it. And then when was the turn that I'm going to disrupt myself, and as my co-founder Andreas, who we know each other from the McKinsey time, let's start that business. And that was exactly the time was mature enough to start the business.
So you approached to your co-founder.
Oh, yes.
With the initiative, right?
Yeah, he is. So aside from Thomas, he's maybe my other closest friend, and we knew at some time we are going to start a company together. We didn't know which one, okay. And then we were always in conversations. And then when the time was mature, we started, thinking about how to start.
I think this is also something very interesting. How did you decide? So I mean, most of the people when starting the company have this first goal of finding the co-founder, right? Is it only you who is starting the company, or you need partner? And who's that partner should be? You look at someone who is sharing the idea, someone who has some specific skills, or just you said it was your friend, right? What made you to go to that person, and what was the lessons that you learned?
So in general, I would put it in one word, and that is trust. So the trust we have had, Andreas and myself, we did invest before we started the company in different other companies, and it was a mutual trust over many years. So we knew that's a huge trust, and therefore we could build on it. It's a good foundation. And it turned out to be more or less one of the most relevant topics, trust. As all of you know, who founded companies or started companies, mistakes love companies. Mistakes embrace companies. So, and you do a lot of mistakes, even so we were experienced, he was experienced with Zalando, I had led the credit bureau, and even so, we did a huge amount of mistakes. And if we haven't had that trust, that mutual trust amongst each other, I think I wouldn't sit today here, or I will sit here to think about how to close down a company. That was very, very crucial topic, is the trust amongst the founders. And I would always now, we do some investments, small investments. We do small investments. And usually I look either two people who just get to know each other at similar event, or they have a kind of history. And the most likely, we cannot predict that, but I would say one of the lessons learned, you should know the people. If you start company with someone else, you should have a deep, deep trust, because you are going to encounter a lot of mistakes, and you are going to encounter a huge amount of ups and downs. And if you are not stable, or relationship is not stable, it's going to fail, most likely.
So you say it's okay to start a company with friend, right? So and you move this relationship to a business relationship as well, right? So I'm sure it's challenging to set aside what is the business meeting, what is the friendship relationship, and yeah, it's one of the challenge to manage, right? To be focused on business as well.
I do completely agree, and that's what Andreas and myself call tough love. We are very open. So I do mistakes, he does mistakes, and if there is no tough love about that, so it's not going to work. So yeah. It's more or less radical transparency, which we have amongst each other. I told him, Andreas, now you sit down close to me, and we finalize this deck. Or he said, Jamal, you are not focusing enough. Let's do that. And if that's not that tough love, if you cannot share that, it will be a struggle. And having that as a friendship and at the same time tough love, that makes work amongst friends.
Okay, wonderful. Let's go back about the product and the company strategy. So you are building the product which is actually competing with the bank solutions, but on the same time partnering with the banks, right? So can you tell us a bit, how do you see banks here? Are they your competitors as a fintech startup, or do you see more a partnership strategy toward this direction?
It's both. As usual, it's both. It's a competition and at the same time it's a partnership if you try to manage that in a beneficial way. And I have learned that from my previous job as a CEO of a credit bureau. We had the most relevant cooperations was with our direct competitors, other credit bureaus. So we defined what is a win-win strategy for both sides. And even it was impossible beforehand, we found a lot of things we could do competition, and we found a lot of things we could cooperate. And the same will happen everywhere. In any interesting market, you will have a competition. And if you don't have a competition, maybe there is no market, or it's still not mature enough to do that. And if you manage, and in our case, we are managing that partnership with the banks, with other lenders, in a quite easy way. We tell them, so look, we know the customer upfront, we know the credit worthiness. So we know if you are going to give a loan, a consumer loan, which is without assets or without collaterals. So we know the probability of default. And why we know that? Because the people sign up months ago or years ago, and we could look into the entire transactional data in addition to the behavioral data, in addition to the data which the credit bureaus have, and we can tell you in advance if you want to serve customers in the prime sector, we send you or we show your offers only to people who are in the prime sector. If you have more, as a lender, as a bank, if you have more focus on the near prime, and we have many banks and lenders are focusing on the near prime, and usually if a prime customer would apply, maybe he doesn't or she doesn't get a loan. And the opposite is true. If people from the near prime sector applying, they are costing a lot of money for the banks. And at the end of the day, they don't get what they want, a loan. So, and we try to do the win-win-win, which is the win for the banks or for our partners as a banks, the win for our customers, because the user experience is much easier, much better if they know in advance the likelihood of getting the loan I'm applying to is 80, 90%, and they get it at the end of the day. And for us, it's great because we have the commission which we get. The more loans we broker, the more commission we get from it. And so to phrase it in that way, yes, is a competition, but is a huge potential for partnerships. Yes.
And you also mentioned very interesting points about your strategy in finding the right investors, which is, I think, also very important topic to think about, right? Who you go to and what is that you suggest to them actually, and how you select which might be the most, which might be the best investor for your company, right? Please tell us a bit about your strategy in terms of finding the investors, and who are the investors, and why did you decide to go to them?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it goes back to when we started the company. And at the beginning, we were privileged enough to have a big network, and so Andreas and myself, we had a big network. And at the beginning, we asked our friends and family. So more or less, if you look to our cap table, so many of our friends and family, and that to be crucial at the end, why that was a good. So we asked them, and most of them didn't even look into the pitch deck. We had a proper pitch deck, but most of them said, you guys, if you start that kind of startup, we are going to invest. Tell us what is the valuation or who is leading, and we will put some money. And in that stage, three institutional investors came in, approached us because they heard, from other companies that we are raising money. And I said, we know more or less the topic. It's fintech, is the right timing, is the right team. And we took 3 other, in addition to our family and friends, which was the majority by far. We took 3 institutional investors. Two of them are pretty known. The one is Ribbit from the US, and the other one is Index Ventures and the N Capital. So we took them with even it was a seed. So we had institutional investors in addition to our family and friends. And later on, one other institutional investor came in, that's Mosaic Ventures. And then we started looking how we are growing, what kind of markets we are entering. And we decided it was, so we have to, it's not, so we didn't say that is going to happen. So we put different options. And usually it's not that easy. You say, I'm looking to strategic investors and they will come and approach you to do that. So what usually we do is we define different potential scenarios and we say, okay, that's top 1, 2, and 3. And if one happens is usually you are lucky. And at some stage we thought we could have a strategic investor. And we had a few discussions with different strategic investors. And one of them is Santander. Santander, the bank, Ventures. They came to us and say, look, we know the market, we know the space. And in case you want to go beyond Germany, we would be good position to help you to do that. And we were in negotiations with them a few months, and then we say, okay, we are happy to do that, but we don't need any corporate influence because we even don't know where the company is heading. Okay. If you give us the freedom to be like creative and maybe to fail or maybe to have success, and that from my perspective, that was one of the very, very good discussions we had to say, if you would tell us the opposite, we wouldn't invest in you. And that was the reason why Santander InnoVentures invested in us. And we have the entire freedom currently to do whatever we like. We don't have any obligations. And then a few months after that, Experian is the biggest credit bureau in the world. They have a venture arm and they invested. So if now I do the categories, we have 3 categories of investors. The one is family and friends, which still have a big chunk aside from us founders. Then we have the institutional investors interested in multiple X something, and we have 2 strategic investors, which could be potential acquirer of the business.
Yeah, so you brought this very interesting topic. So friends, some people think that when you start with the investment or financial support from the friends and family, it's something not relevant to successful startups. But yeah, your point is that this is actually very good way to start, right? And very helpful way to start.
It's difficult to generalize. Yeah. So it's difficult. In our case, it was, aside from the trust with my co-founder, that turned to be a crucial point. As I said earlier, mistakes love companies, specifically startups, and we did many of them. And we went through a very, very deep crisis. And at that time, it was very difficult to show, aside from the team, to show the traction, to show the KPIs and metrics which you would expect at some stage. And it was very difficult to raise money at some time. And when we approached our family and friends, and one of them is sitting here, the support we got was invaluable. So it was a huge value which we got from our family and friends, because they said, if you guys approach us again, and we believe in you, we trust in you, we don't have to do a due diligence, we know you are investing or co-invest, we as the founders again, we will put the money. And that was, at that time, maybe, again, aside from the trust between my co-founder and myself, maybe it's the second most crucial decision we have had done, that our family and friends investors still trust in what we are doing. And they backed us. Even many, many investors would go back, say, no, I'm not going. And that is, so more or less, is the reason why I'm sitting here today.
So yeah, startups, when especially on very very early stage, are going through very big psychological challenges, let's say, right? And I'm sure support from friends and family is also an emotional support, that you have people around you who is supporting in what you started, right? And yeah, I want to ask you, you mentioned you had so many mistakes and where you learned and you had so many challenges. Would you say there is some specific challenges or some specific things to consider for the fintech companies when starting the company in this area? Is it somehow different from other fields? Or is it the same structure and it's the same challenges?
It's difficult to say if it's only relating to the fintech sector. What I can say, so any team has 100% of capabilities or resources, and any team in any sector has whatever you have 100% of the time. And the challenge we had is how much of the time of the 100% you are focusing on the customers, you are focusing on the product, you are focusing on the competition, the partnership out there, and how much of the 100% you are allocating internally. So you don't have more than 100%. The more noise you have internally, the less resources you can allocate to the outside. And what we have learned is, so take all the noise out of the inside. Take all the noise out. There is a lot of noise within the companies. And one of the reasons is once we reflected and say what is causing a lot of trouble was internal discussions, internal noise. And we don't have more than 100%, and the rest of the resources we have allocated to the outside. And that was not enough. If you can maximize, you cannot go to 0% internally. So it is something to organize, you have to do recruiting, you have to do feedbacks, you have to lead the teams. And so there is a minimum required to organize internally. But if you minimize that internal resources you are allocating and maximize the other part of the 100% to the outside, like to the competition, to the partners, to the customers, that is still crucial. When I reflect at the time when we said focus, 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 yes. It looks like very easy and everyone will tell you that. And then we looked into what initiatives we are doing within the company. Research product with University A, research product with University B, and people love that work because, people, whatever you give, and we killed almost all that which is not beneficial. So we killed that, and people were upset, which I do understand. Otherwise, giving that kind of focus to the company, allocating almost all time of the resources to the outside world rather than to the inside, or useless, at that time of stage, useless efforts, that saved us together. And in addition to that is one which I learned with a lot of pain. And I recommend that book to everyone. It's from Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio wrote a very interesting book, Principles. So it's for free, like love, it's for free. So everyone can have it for free, Ray Dalio. And he put one principle in place which I really admire. He said, pain plus reflection equals progress. And there is nothing without pain. So there is nothing without. If you go and exercise, you will feel the pain in your muscles. And that is a sign that you are kind of progressing. But you have to reflect on the good and on the bad. And I think that equation resonates a lot to our stage. And I recommend to all our teams, pain plus reflection equals progress. And that is a kind of mantra we are using currently in the company.
Wonderful. And last question. So you said you were in quite good position in very successful company, and then you challenge yourself and start your own business. If you rewind and go back to that time, would you make a same decision? Would you be here doing a startup?
What I would do definitely is disrupting myself. So it's personal. It's not something which you apply to everyone. It's a personal approach, and what I would do definitely is disrupting myself. I would reflect at the beginning more seriously about, not just starting a business and be feeling privileged that a lot of people are approaching us to invest, that the idea, the team looks good. I would go back and reflect, what we want out of this business and how we could even minimize the amount of mistakes we could do, because we are going to do mistakes, but many of them were avoidable. If we have thought about them in the beginning, we could have avoided many of those. Not 100%, but we could have avoided many. So to your question, yes, I would do that, but I would do more reflected, more thoughtful about what we wanted with the company and how we can avoid or implement specific procedures upfront to avoid many of the mistakes which company love.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jamal. It was very interesting to talk to you, and thank you for very specific, practical advice.